Have you ever been in a situation where your plant is about to die and you are desperate enough to pluck all of its leaves hoping one of them grows a new pop? I'm sure we all did.
Hello everyone, my name is Chuck and my plants are dying. No, seriously, some of these are dying. In this video, I'm going to show you how to salvage your plants, make the most of what is left and even propagate from them. First off, I would like to show you this case. This is a terminal flower stalk and this is not your fault. The plant likes to do that once in a while. Echeverias are polycarpic, which means that they can produce flower stalks from the sides like this one, or the main stem becomes a flower stalk. This is a healthy plant right here. It is producing lots of flower stalks and this is perfectly normal. Once these flower stalks dry out, only these bits would die, but the main plant would still live on. Now in cases like these, the main stem has turned into a flower stalk, which means that this part of the stalk, this part of the stem, which is now a flower stalk, is drying out. It's slowly dying and eventually even the main stem would dry out. But this whole process takes a long time, maybe even a year or so. I am not sure when this started turning terminal, but I believe sometime back in autumn. It is currently November, which means that it has only been 7 or 8 months. I say only, but that's a whole lot of time, you know. So this whole process takes a long time and there's no need to panic. With terminal flower stalks, there's not much really that you could do, except you could help speed the process along either by chopping off the flowers at the tip, or just leaving it like this. It will take a bit slower, but pops would still grow around it. But one advantage of removing the flowers from the stalk is that you're not going to attract some pests, because a lot of insects and pests are interested in the nectar from the flowers and you wouldn't want to attract them. So yeah. This is another case of a terminal flower stalk, and I've already removed the stem, the main stalk, which turned into a flower, and around it are a lot of pops growing, which means that all of the growing energy is focused on the pops. There's nothing going to the main stem, you know, and that's one way to help move things along. So that was the first way with terminal flower stalk. Now moving on to the next case, this is a fungal attack. As you can see, there's still marks, traces of fungal infection. As you can see, the tip is rotten, it's dark black. I've already removed the affected leaves just to see if the rest of the plant is okay. It seems okay. It's good that it hasn't spread. And with fungal attacks, there are 3 general types. The first would be a fungal attack that starts at the roots going upwards, and that one is lethal. There's no recovering from that. The main plant is as good as dead. Your only hope here is to detect this problem early enough that you are able to prevent the rot from spreading further. You could still grab the leaves and offsets and propagate from them, but only if they are healthy. The second would be superficial, somewhere around the stem or on the node, somewhere at the top. It didn't start with the roots. That one is recoverable, and all you have to do is to excise the diseased part, remove it. So after cleaning up the infected parts, you will end up with a similar situation as the first situation, the first scenario where you had a terminal flower stalk. In this case, you do not have the apical meristem anymore. You know, the growing tip and the main stem is already gone. And this promotes the growth of the lateral meristems, which means that pops would grow all around the sides. This would take a bit of time, and if things go correctly, the infection does not progress any further, then you would end up with something like this. As you can see, these are stumps and there's a whole lot of tiny pops growing around the stem. Something like that is still recoverable and you do not have to worry about it. Now, I mentioned that there are 3 types of fungal attacks. The first one would be the really fatal one where the infection starts with the roots. The second would be superficial infections starting somewhere at the top. The third type would be with the harmless types of fungi, like I forgot what they were called. I think it was dog's vomit and it's tiny cups. After doing a bit of research, the dog's vomit fungus is not actually a member of kingdom fungi, but rather part of kingdom Protoctista. Anyway, there are non-lethal types of fungi, which can be quite scary at times, but they do nothing to the plant. So if you have those, then celebrate, because there's nothing wrong. Your plant won't die. Actually, this Echeveria exotic here is the same case. In this case, the stem has already rotten out. The main stem is already gone, or at least it's being obscured by all of these pops. So as you can see, if you give it enough time, it will recover. It will start with start looking something like this, really ugly, just a stump. And in time, a lot of pups would grow around it and they would progress and even mature. So yeah, it just requires a whole lot of patience. So here's another example of superficial damage. This is also a fungal infection. I'm just removing some of the leaves so you can see. But again, like the previous cases, I'm just going to leave this alone. And in the case of this particular plant, the infection has not spread, which means that it was only superficial. It was only the top that was affected. And there's nothing else that I need to do anymore but to wait. Just protect it enough so it does not burn, because by removing all of these dead leaves at the top, I'm exposing the more sensitive leaves at the bottom. So I might have to move this somewhere where it could get a bit of shade. I'm jumping back and forth now. Let me just go to this one. This is from memory, I think this was an Echeveria lazarus. I hope you realize how fitting that name is. This plant is back from the dead. This is another terminal flower stalk. As you can see, the flower stalk is still here. It's already dry and a lot of pups are growing from the sides. I'm just leaving it like this and just see what it does. So among all of the dying scenarios that I presented so far, terminal flower stalks, these are the most safe. Then situations where you get infections from fungi or even from insects and pests that destroy your plant, they are a bit risky because you still have to make sure that you have contained the spread of the infection before you are able to expect pups like this to grow. So there's two parts to that. If you're unsure what to do about infestation and fungus, you could check out my episodes on fungi and pests and other diseases in my Let's Plant series. The link would be down below or somewhere here. The next thing I would like to talk about would be flower stalks on an otherwise healthy plant. As you can see, this plant is really healthy. There's nothing wrong with this. There's really nothing wrong with the plant, but I'm including this here because it's the flower stalks that will eventually die out. It has pushed out several flower stalks. As you can see here, I've already gotten rid of a few because they were already drying out. But there's still a few here which are looking quite good, really healthy. I made an episode about this before where I shown you how to propagate via flower stalks, and this is the result. So this originally used to be a flower stalk on one of my Paul Bunyans. As you can see, it has grown a lot of pups along the stem. Some of them are even pushing out their own roots, which means that they're ready to be moved on their own. And to prove that this is a flower stalk, this stem here, it still has some of the dried out flowers here. In case you're wondering, yes, I just chopped off the flower stalk and planted it in here, left it somewhere protected and forgot about it. And about a year in, I got these plants. In the past, I always kept saying that I do not usually propagate from flower stalks because the success rate is low. But it turns out that I haven't been waiting long enough, because look at the success rates, man. A whole lot of plants. Same here. So I've got a lot of these, even more in my propagation station, but I only gotten a few here. They're quite heavy. So how did I do this? I'm going to do a demonstration. I just had to grab my secateurs, but in any case, just take your plant, and this is one of the Gibiflora based hybrids where the freely or the carunculated plants. I think the success rates for these is really high because they have really thick stems which take a whole lot of time, take a lot longer to dry out completely, which is why this one's worked. These flower stalks have been here for over a year now. By now, I think I did this sometime in October or November. In this case, what I'm going to do is just to chop off these flowers and go as low as possible. That way we have more nodes to work with. And when I say nodes, it's these things where the leaves are connected to, because each node here is potentially a new plant. Take this stem again, for example. All of the pups that you see are growing out of the nodes that are left on the stem. So if you leave a lot of nodes on the stem, there's more points of growing, and that is why it's important to chop as low as possible. The closer you can get to the main stem, the better. I'm going to do it on the rest of the stems here, get as much of the nodes as possible. And there's a couple more left, 2 more. I think I need the smaller scissors here. Aha! And we're done. Now all I need to do is to take these stems and plant them somewhere, and I could expect new plants, new pups to grow maybe half a year or a year from now. It takes a long time, so make sure to place them somewhere safe, somewhere protected, somewhere out of direct sunlight. That way they would not burn or dry out too quickly. Given enough time, given enough patience, you would have whole new plants. Alternatively, you could also do something like this. So in this case, I just left the flower stalks on the plant, and eventually they might grow some pups along the flower stalks, along the nodes. I'm not kidding when I say that the success rates or the chances of this happening are really low, because unlike detached flower stalks, there's no way for these to live on unless they produce plants or pups along the stem. But for this, if the flower stalks here die, it won't really matter because there's still a main plant here. I think it's some sort of a check done by the plant to see if it is worth trying to grow new plants from the stem. In this case, the golden glow, this is an Echeveria golden glow. The golden glow tends to have better success rates with this type of propagation anyway compared to most other plants, but even so, it's still a low rate, and you're better off doing something like this, like what I did here, to promote the growth of the lateral meristems. I'm going to leave this stem alone, but as for the rest, there might still be some growth here. I'm going to chop them off and replant them in separate pots. Do I need leaves on the stalk for this to work? It definitely helps, but it is not required. I would highly recommend picking stalks that have healthy leaves because these leaves can perform photosynthesis. Succulent stems could also photosynthesize, but I like to think that the leaves are better at it. This might be why flower stalks from species with large leaves such as the Gibifloras can survive for too long enough to produce pups. Would you recommend chopping the flower stalk into sections? Given what I now know about the success rates of just planting the whole flower stalk, I won't recommend chopping up the flower stalks anymore because the success rates are just too low to be worth the while. So I've shown you 3 possible scenarios where you could propagate off of dying plants or dying parts of plants. And I hope you learned something new here. For more tips and tricks, make sure to subscribe to my channel. I've got a lot more videos like these, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.